This is my Croton, and he's not looking too shabby, is he? I'd actually say he's becoming a rather handsome fellow. I mean, just look at those gorgeous leaves, almost good enough to eat. Though you shouldn't, because you'll end up vomiting all over the place. Yeah, these bad boys are toxic to all and sundry, so put the knife and fork down and be on your merry way. Anyway, me and Crotons have had a checkered past. We weren't good friends at all up until recently, mainly because he heard that I killed his brother many moons ago. And it's true, but in my defense, I was a noob at all this plant game at the time. Now I know much more what I'm doing, and it shows because I've actually been able to keep this guy alive, and look, he's putting on a bit of a growth spurt. I just hope those new leaves start to come out redder like the ones further down the plant. If yours is doing the same, then don't worry my plant friend, I'll spill the beans on why your Croton is only growing green leaves in a little bit. So yeah, I've got a murderous history with Croton, and I reckon you might have too. Go on, let me know in the comments. They're pretty easy to accidentally kill if you get a few things wrong, but luckily for you, I'll share my newfound wisdom with you today so that you can have the best Croton on the block to show off to all your friends and family. I bleat on about this all the time in my videos because it really does make the difference between plant success or plant misery, but it really pays to have a think about where our little fellas live in the real world and the conditions they experience so that we can mimic this as best we can at home. I've done just that for our Croton here, so there's no need to get your encyclopedia out. Now pay attention because we're going to use this information to nail our care for them indoors throughout this video. So the tropical climate of Indonesia and Malaysia is where these fellas call home, the lucky things. You'll often see them chilling out under the canopy of larger trees in the jungle. This means they've been brought up on a diet of dappled bright sunlight, humid air and consistent warmth. So that means we should only give them bright indirect light, right? Sort of. You see, dappled sunlight in the jungle is still very bright. Chances are it's much brighter than the light you can offer them in your home. That's certainly the case for me, what with me living in the Costa del Sheffield where the sun hardly ever comes out to say hello, and the result is green leaves. Yes, a Croton that is slowly losing its vivid colours is a sign that it's not getting enough sunlight. Check out my fella. You'll notice that the leaves near the base are redder than the newer ones at the top. The reason for this is simple. It shows I'm torturing him. He grew those red leaves when he was living with his original grower, probably in a nice super bright greenhouse. Since moving in with me, he's shown his grumpiness by only growing leaves with greens and yellows. And it's all because my home isn't very bright. It's amazing just how distinct that is, isn't it? You can clearly see exactly at what point he was moved from his 5-star accommodation to the slums of my home. In a climate like mine, I'd be ideally giving him a few hours of direct sun. This would really bring the colours out. And this can absolutely work for your little fella too. But if he's been existing in a dark corner of your room up until now, I'd transition him into more sun slowly so he can get used to it. Made the transition too quickly and you risk upsetting him and his leaves will start to fade or even turn brown. You might start with an hour a day in the sun for a week and then up that to 2 hours a day the following week, etc. Sounds annoying and time consuming, I know, but it's the best way to bring out those bright colours without sending him into shock. I'm fast running out of space in my home for plants, so I stuck him on this shelf in my dining room, which really isn't the brightest spot in my home. Far from it. Well, he sure did look miserable until I gave him and his best friend Ox a grow light to sit above them. And you can see which side the light faces the leaves because he's doing his best impression of a smooth criminal. To stop that, the solution is simple. To rotate him every once in a while so that all sides can soak up the vitamin D equally. Maybe turning him 90 degrees every time I water. Simples. And having this fancy grow light in this spot is a game changer. It means I can take a dark spot in my home where no plant in their right mind would be happy and turn it into luxury accommodation for these two plants in particular that love the summer sun. And you can bag yourself a 10% discount off Sansi lights using my code in the description, by the way. Now, Crotons can be a little bit fussy when it comes to changes in their environment. They've even been known to down tools and drop all their leaves when moved from one part of the house to the other. I know, fussy little aren't they? Now, like I said, they hail from the tropics of Indonesia and Malaysia, and it's not known to get particularly frosty down there, so they're not really used to having a cold draft on their neck. If they're made to hang out next to an external door that gets opened often with all that cold air coming in, they're likely to get a serious grump on. So it's best to keep them somewhere where the temperature doesn't swing all that much. They're more sensitive to this than most other plants. Mine lives well away from any external door, and the nearest window to it hasn't been opened in years, mainly because I can't get to it with that Hoya taking over that area of the room. And if you're going away for a winter break and temps drop below 15 degrees Celsius for a long time, you're likely to come back to a Croton crying in the corner, asking where you've been all this time. Seriously, they're not keen on the cold at all. What about watering then? Should be pretty easy, right? Give them a drink every Saturday and be on your merry way. Well, not so much. As I mentioned before, it's always a good idea to refer to their natural environment and go from there like a good student. And these bad boys are found in the hot, humid jungles of Indonesia and Malaysia, where they experience periods of feast and famine. This means they get rained on like it's no tomorrow, and then dry out relatively quickly from the high temperatures. The humid air means that they live on soil that is consistently damp, but they never sat in saturated soil for long. What does this mean for us then? Water every day? Well, not so much. Keeping the roots saturated will only make them rot and kill off your beloved plant. Instead, aim to keep the soil damp but not wet. In my experience, crotons can get a bit fussy when allowed to dry out too much, and certainly hate being kept in a swamp. Here's my approach. I whip out Mr. Sheffield's favourite gadget in the whole wide world, the moisture meter, which you can find on my Amazon page by the way, and probe that sucker a bunch of times until the reading shows moist going on dry. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't have to be an exact science. Your plant won't spontaneously combust if you let it get dry, but the optimum range is just getting into the dry zone. This way the roots stay hydrated enough and you avoid them staying constantly wet and rotting. Aim your probe at least halfway into the soil too. If you're only probing the top and it reads dry, then there's a good chance it's still wet further into the pot where most of the roots are hanging out. When it's time to water, then do so deeply, my plant friend. You can't give it enough at this point. Overwatering is much more about frequency than volume. Drench that sucker until it's blue in the face and it'll be just fine. Trust me, we want all the soil to be wet. A little dribble here or there and chances are most of the soil will still be dry. Not a happy bunny. Now, it's always a fantastic idea to check the health of the roots roughly every year to make sure there isn't anything sinister going on like rot and that everything is looking like it should. Remember, healthy roots should be beige and plump and not black and mushy. As you can see, the roots of my plant are coming out to say hello at the bottom of the pot, and you might think this means it desperately needs a repot, but this isn't always the case. I bottom water my plants, and this tends to draw the roots out of the bottom of the pot where the water is. Giving the pot a squeeze, and it feels like there is still room to go, and pulling its trousers down, we can see it's pretty much fine. It's not a mass of roots with no soil, not at all. And this is exactly what you want to see from healthy roots. Beige and plump, good enough to eat. If anything is looking black, then you should cut it out, give it a wash and spray with hydrogen peroxide to kill the bacteria and repot into fresh soil. Plants normally bounce back from the trauma we inflict on them, so there is hope if this is happening to yours. When it does come to soil, you really want to pop your little fella into a mix that is nice and free draining. Heavy clay-like soils ruin roots. There's just no air for them to breathe, and this is the most important thing about it. Roots don't go rotten from too much water, no, it's the lack of oxygen that does the damage. Keeping a plant in just soil is the worst thing you can do for this very reason. So how do we add oxygen to the soil? It's as simple as using lighter materials like coconut coir, perlite and pumice. These materials increase the air pockets around the roots and they won't suffocate them when we add water. To make it all simple, you can grab yourself a pre-made mix from Botanica and use my code for a 10% discount linked below. I switched to them last year and it's really made a difference to my plants. Now your Croton needs his tin of spinach just as much as you, me and Popeye to grow big and strong. This means that you should be feeding him with a decent fertiliser while he's growing. The when he's growing part is the bit that seems to flummox lots of folks, and it's because we're often told not to fertilise during the winter. The problem is though that that's a blanket care tip that's a little flawed. If your plant is growing at all during the winter, then you should absolutely continue to feed it. This is especially true if yours happily lives under a Santi grow light like mine. If your winters tend to be very dark and gloomy like yours truly, then growth may well have slowed to a snail's pace, in which case you should stop giving him his tin of spinach. And what feed should you give? One that is heavy on nitrogen, since all we're really after is good leafy growth. Luckily for us, most all-purpose or houseplant specific feeds tend to be nitrogen heavy anyway. Houseplant Focus by Growth Technology, which is the one I use, and Miracle Grow certainly are. And if you're not feeding your Croton, then growth will probably be slow and you may start to see some yellowing leaves, so something to look out for. Now you might be thinking that because this guy naturally hangs out in the humid jungles of Indonesia and Malaysia, that he loves himself a bit of high humidity, and that because your house is low humidity, you're destined to fail with him. Well, try not to worry too much, my plant friend. Yes, it's true that they do like a bit of high humidity because it's what they're used to, but they can absolutely adapt to growing homes with lower humidity. In my experience, the thing that really upsets plants is inconsistent humidity. You know, living right next to a hot radiator in the winter probably isn't going to do it any favours, but keep it somewhere where the environment doesn't swing too much, it'll probably be fine. The UK tends to be fairly humid, but I keep mine well away from any radiators during the winter and he's happy as Larry. Now, the Sheffield Mayplant's mantra that I always bang on about is they will always grow back, and this is just as true with the plucky Croton. You can prune your guy to your heart's content and new stems will always grow back. If he's getting a little lanky with a long central stem, then don't be shy in giving it a cut. It will only create a nice compact bushy shape from where it sends out new branches, which is no bad thing. Sadly, Crotons get afflicted with pests just as much as any other houseplant. They tend to be magnets for sap-sucking suckers like spider mites, and this is particularly a problem if you live somewhere warm and dry. You're looking for very fine, wispy webbing on the underside of the leaves and stems that travel small distances. Grab a light and go hunting if you notice mottling on the leaves. And of course, that damp soil I mentioned earlier is just perfect for the most annoying of all creatures, the pathetically puny fungus gnat, to make hay and have a party. It feels like I've dedicated my entire life to finding out the best way to destroy these suckers, and I finally landed on something that beat the little gits when I nearly lost all hope. And no, it wasn't neem oil or mosquito bits. To find out what it was, you should definitely watch the video linked on the screen now, and subscribe for more fun. See you next time.